Welcome to this edition of What's the Score? Let me remind you, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please click the like button wherever you listen to this program. And if you'd like to support this and future programs, I encourage you to become a patron via patreon.com. There'll be details to follow in the middle of the program. We couldn't do the program without our patrons, so thank you. And enjoy today's wonderful podcast. Today's program made possible by patrons like you. Welcome to where we celebrate music from the movies. From the golden age to present day, we've got it all covered. We talk to those in the entertainment industry and find out about their favorite scores. You found the podcast, What's the Score? I'm your host, Frank R. Wilson. So sit back, relax, grab a popcorn, and let's see what we'll be hearing today. Recognize that music? It's a favorite of our guest today. Now, he's a hero to those of us who love film scores. He's ended up overseeing the re-releases of many soundtracks which offer improved sound quality as well as previously unreleased music. He's worked with Film Score Monthly, La La Land, Quartet Records, and many others. Now, what caught my eye, though, was his recent work on the scores for the James Bond films, in particular, Man with the Golden Gun and Moonraker. He also, by the way, has made it very clear to me that he's an avid baseball fan, with his favorite team being the Philadelphia Phillies. So obviously we're coming upon the time of year when he's going to be enthralled with that for a while. I look forward to learning more about his work. And so with that, please join me in welcoming Neil S. Bulk to the program. Hi, Neil.
Hi.
I've never gotten applause for an intro. Thank you. That's great.
Amazing. What a...
No, my pleasure. I'm so looking forward to this because I've never had a chance to talk to someone in your position that does what you do, so I'm looking forward to learning a lot and sharing that with our listeners.
Sure.
As is my tradition, I always kind of like to find out a little bit about the person before we kind of get into the work stuff and that sort of thing. So I was hoping if maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and, you know, growing up, your family, and where you grew up, and influences like that up and before you started your career.
Well, I grew up in New Jersey. That's where my family still is, and that's also why I'm a Phillies fan, because of we were Southern New Jersey, which is close to Philadelphia, and we got all the Philadelphia television stations. Just grew up in a home that had a lot of music and a lot of movies. And it sort of coalesced into this love of film music. I was raised on a lot of classical music by my father, but he also encouraged, some film score listening. He bought me the Star Trek The Motion Picture record when I was 3. So it's sort of, I didn't really have much of a choice, I guess.
Gee, I wonder if that was Dad's way of getting the record for himself, but he said, oh, no, actually, it's for Neil.
No, believe it or not, it was actually for me. He had his own record collection. So that was my record. And it still is. I still have that record with me out here in California.
Oh, wow. How neat. Did you ever feel like, my listeners will know I mention this a lot, did you ever kind of feel a little bit like an outsider because you liked something like film scores while everybody else was listening to, the pop music and rock and roll and stuff?
Totally. Even among, my friends, I remember one of them saying to me, "Do you like anything with words?" And it was just sort of like, this. I don't know. We all like what we like. It was certainly very enlightening when I moved out to California and started meeting like-minded people. It's like, oh, I'm not alone. This is a cool thing.
That does help, doesn't it? I mean, and you're right. I went years for feeling like a dope or whatever, that I like this orchestral, without words, like you say, and nobody else could really relate to it. And it was only, later on with the advent of like social media and whatnot, that I found there were other people, a lot of people that were out there just like me. So I know what you mean.
I remember in 1999 when the Phantom Menace album came out, and Tower Records used to stay open until midnight on Monday nights so they could start selling the new albums technically Tuesday morning.
Ah, okay.
So I went, and there were a lot of people there to get the Phantom Menace album. This was back in New Jersey, but still, there were a lot of people there to get the Phantom Menace album. But I also wanted The Mummy by Jerry Goldsmith. And it's still, I got the puzzled look. I went, well, wait, no, he's good too.
And I'm intrigued by your comment about, don't you like music with words and stuff? It's funny. I can relate to that. I don't necessarily listen to the words first. It's the melody, it's the music that will draw me in, and then if I like that, then I start to pay attention to the words. Does that make sense?
It does. And sometimes you're sort of like, you sort of go, oh, that's what this song was about? I wasn't even paying any attention to that. I was listening to everything else but the word. The words were just another instrument for me, and I wasn't paying attention to the narrative.
Yeah. How interesting. So I can see where you got your love of film music at a very early age, and that makes a lot of sense. You've chosen a lot of great cues today from a wide variety of different composers and film genres and those sorts of things. I thought we'd start off with the main title from the film Batman, which was written by Danny Elfman. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to choose that to be amongst some of your favorites.
Yeah, it's so when I told my wife that I was going to be recording a podcast today, she said, "What, James Bond or Star Trek?" And I was like, "Well, no, I think it's more This Is Your Life."
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And so Batman's one that's sort of been with me close to the start of my career, and so I've been involved with 3 different releases of it.
Huh.
So the first time
of the same movie, same score,
same music, same movie.
Huh.
And what happened was, this was before I was really working with La La Land Records, but I was at a studio that was transferring tapes, and they were transferring Batman tapes, and that's a score I just knew the score really well. I love the album, and so in one of my more ambitious modes, I called them and said, "Hey, I saw these tapes getting transferred. Do you need someone to produce this for you?" And they said, "No, we've got someone, but if anything happens, we'll let you know." And I went, "Okay, great, wonderful. Just throw my name into the hat."
Sure.
And they did call me and they said, "Well, we're having trouble finding material." And I went, "Okay, let's see what we can do." And we wound up, I made some calls, some emails, and we wound up finding the material. And they put out the album in 2010, and we issued it at Comic-Con in San Diego.
Okay.
And it was very successful, but I was never 100% thrilled with that album. And I couldn't say why. It just didn't sound particularly good to me. We had, people were happy. They had the music, and I don't know. It just didn't. It wasn't ideal for me. But it was very popular, and it led to more work. And we did Batman Returns immediately after that, and that was terrific. And then a few years later, they said, "Well, we want to reissue Batman." I went, "Well, I think we can do it better. I think we can do it better than last time, because I had actually found some more material for it that we didn't have access to." And so they put out a collection of Batman and Batman Returns, and it was improved. I went, "Great, wonderful, there you go. We've done Batman again."
Yeah.
But then Mondo, a company that puts out titles on vinyl, a lot of classic scores on vinyl, they said they want to put out Batman, and I went, "Gee, I think we could do it even a little bit better." So I just keep working on it. So it's like I've done Batman, several times now, and each time I think it's a little bit better. So yeah, so I picked the main title from Batman just because it's one that I just keep working on it.
How funny! Well, is there going to be a fourth?
never say never. I guess I don't know if there is. I mean, look. I would love to. I would love to do it. I'd love to do it again on CD. But I think what's out there is pretty good right now.
Okay, all right. Well, let's have a listen for ourselves. This is again the main title from the film called Batman, and it's written by composer Danny Elfman. Okay, I'm not. I love film music, but I'm not a musician, and I know very little about the ins and outs of how things work. So I've got a very simple question for you, and that's simply this: what the heck does a producer of a CD do?
That's a funny question. I'm still trying to figure it out. I remember like one of the first albums I was doing with Lucas Kendall for Film Score Monthly.
Right.
Here's the artwork, and I looked at it and it said produced by Neil S. Balk, and I was like, well, I don't think that's right. And I was sort of talking myself out of the credit, but it stuck, and so I don't debate it anymore. Everything comes through me.
Okay.
When I'm producing an album. I look at the artwork, I look at the notes. Obviously, I handle the material for the music. I coordinate with the studios to get the material, to edit the material, to work with mixers, to work with mastering engineers, and I put the whole thing together. So I do produce, that finished thing that you hold in your hand, that all funneled through me at some capacity.
Sure.
And so I don't do the artwork. I'm not an artist. I don't do the writing, but I certainly, I proof the notes. I go through them. I make little corrections. I give, some input. Certainly when I'm looking at the artwork, I give input and I have ideas, I don't know art, but I know what I like.
Sure.
And, but mainly, my main focus is on the music, getting the best sounding material, and making sure it's presented in the best possible way. I like to get performances correct. I like to get, the best mixes, and so that's really, but I focus on everything. That's what a producer does.
I mean, I'm trying to get my arms around this. That, and of course, I'm at an age now where I wear hearing aids, so obviously my hearing is compromised. But what is it when you're listening to the mixes or that part of the process? I mean, do you have to listen to something over and over and over to try to figure out, is this the best way to present this music, or are we missing, the volume is too low on this instrument, or, I mean, what kind of detail does that get into?
Absolutely. It's a lot of listening, and checking and double checking, and sometimes I'm not always so sure of myself that I sort of have to step back and go, okay, what did they do? Or maybe I need a break from this. But there's absolutely a ton of listening and checking. And now in some cases, I mean, there are some things you can't do, but if you're doing like a full score remix, if you're doing something from like a 16 track or a 24 track, you're sort of like, well, we have to sort of be in the ballpark. We can, be a little different, but we don't need to editorialize too much. But we need to be, and every project is different as well.
Sure.
Say.
I mean, is it hard to? I mean, I've done a little bit of video editing, mostly as a hobbyist, not anything serious. But one of the things I notice is, like, after 4 or 5 times, it's like, okay, I mean, I don't know if I can. Is it hard to keep? Maybe the best way I can describe this is it hard to keep a fresh pair of ears for every time you're listening to it?
Sure. It's funny. If I can talk about Moonraker just for a second here.
Yeah, and we'll talk more later. But yeah, you can mention it now.
I'll use Moonraker as an example. So Moonraker is a project that I was listening to constantly. And just before it went to manufacture, I caught a mistake on it.
Huh. And
I was like, no, wait a minute. This is something I've been listening to constantly. And it was just a little glitch, little teeny tiny thing that, like, I don't know if anybody would have ever noticed, but I noticed it. And so I had to work with Doug Schwartz over like 2 days to fix this thing, but we got it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. It was like, why can't we get this right? But we finally did. We got it right, and it turned out. So it was, again, you can listen all the time, but something can get through. But luckily, something didn't get through. So
how funny! That's great. Another one of the cues that you chose, and I'm trying to remember it. My notes say theme from Star Trek, but I think it's the end titles, if I'm not mistaken. Written by James Horner. I'm assuming this might be a soundtrack that you worked on, but I am so curious about what is it about the music that you wanted to share it today.
Yes. So what I picked for this is interesting. Now, Star Trek II is another album similar to Batman that I've worked on twice. We did it. I worked with Lucas and Mike Matessino and Doug Schwartz way back in 2008 and 2009 when Lucas put it out on Retrograde Records, which was a spin-off of Films for Monthly Records. And again, that was very early in my career, and I thought, geez, maybe we could do this a little bit better. Not that there was anything wrong. Again, not that anything wrong with the 2009. It was a terrific sounding album from the 3-track tapes.
Right.
But I just thought maybe we could revisit this one. And so we got the tapes, and suddenly we had way more tapes than we had in 2009. I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting this.
Huh.
So it turned into a much bigger project, but I think ultimately a much better project. And one of the things that I got to include on this, and this is what the samples I sent you is, in 1982, that movie had a 45 RPM single. It was called Theme of Star Trek II.
Huh.
Edited end title is what it was called. And it was... it actually is it starts off with the main title, and then it goes into the end title. And this was something that I thought, we should include that on the record, on our new CD. And what I'll do is I'll simply recut our recording, our mix, to match this 45, and that'll be terrific. It's never been on CD, and what a great thing.
Mm.
I just didn't expect it to be so much work. because I just thought it was literally just the main title slapped onto the end title, call it a day, and off you go. But no, they did some internal editing to the end title itself. And I was like, what is going on here? And so it turned into this, like, it took me like an hour or something to recut this thing to get it to match properly. So I was really happy that it turned out well, and I was happy we got to include it.
Yeah, that doesn't strike me. I mean, there weren't many 45s, I don't think, that came out with movie themes, were there? Or
I think there were more, I'm not a collector. So I actually had a friend tell me about this. And there was one for Star Trek The Motion Picture as well.
huh.
And Octopussy had one. Now, that didn't have score on it per se. It had the song on one side.
And instrumental, I think, on the other, right?
Yeah, on the B side, which we included on our Octopussy.
Indeed you did.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a listen to this. So I guess to be correct, this is, well, you tell me again. The cue again is Star Trek II.
It's an awkward title as well, but this is the title that's on the label on the 45. So it's theme of Star Trek II, edited end title.
All right, written by James Horner, correct?
By James Horner. Uh-huh.
Very good. Well, let's sit back and enjoy and listen. You've obviously worked on a lot of different projects. I don't know if you're going to be willing to answer this question or not, but I am kind of curious. Is there one of these projects, one of these film scores that stands out that maybe was the most challenging one of your career? That just provided just lots of challenges, for lack of a better way of saying it?
You know, everyone is different. So there might be a challenge on this one that's different from a challenge on that one.
Yeah.
There's one project, and I actually almost considered including it, but that I'll mention. I did it for Bruce Kimmel at Kritzerland. And it's a score that means a lot to him. It's by Elmer Bernstein. It's for a film called Summer and Smoke.
Huh.
And what was really, really unique about this one was they made the album when the movie came out. And to make the album, they had the original 3-track stereo recording and actually cut those tapes. So if a cue was shortened, they took those recordings and cut those tapes to shorten it.
You mean literally like with a pair of scissors?
Oh, yeah, well, razor blade or whatever.
Or a razor blade, yeah.
That's how they did the editing.
Holy smokes.
And that's the typical reaction is, oof, right? Like, you've cut this priceless material. Except what they did was they saved the trims at the end of each reel. So when we brought this into the computer, into Pro Tools, I had all these little bits and pieces that I could now digitally put right back where they were cut out from and make it seamless and restore the full performance. And I was like, this is so satisfying. What a restoration. Like, I'm actually getting to put this back together to how it should be. So that was a very gratifying project. And I actually got to do it on another project that's coming out hopefully later this year, where, again, the tapes were cut, but the little bits and pieces that were cut were saved. I was like, oh, I can put this back together. So that's really cool.
Holy smokes, that's amazing.
I know.
The technology is really amazing, and it kind of prompted me to think about, too. So I guess there's still a lot of instances where you're dealing with magnetic tape and having to convert it to digital, I guess, right? It's still, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even they were recording digital to tape, in the 80s and 90s. They weren't always doing it to hard drives, so it's like we have those tapes transferred as well, in digital.
Wow. Another cue you brought up, and I love this score, and this is also one of my favorite composers. The film I'm talking about is Total Recall. Mm-hmm. The cue is called Clever Girl, and it's written by composer Jerry Goldsmith. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to include that amongst your favorites today.
Well, this is a fun one. So I co-produced the Total Recall album with Bruce Botnick, who was, worked with Jerry Goldsmith starting with Star Trek Motion Picture. He worked with the Doors before that, and he worked with John Williams. He's James Newton Howard. He's worked with all sorts of people. And so before we did Total Recall, we had worked on Dennis the Menace, which was another Jerry Goldsmith score. Yeah. And I was up in the studio, and I just said to him, I'd really love to hear the German performances for Total Recall. And he said, no, you don't. You don't want to hear those. They're terrible. So what happened was, a little bit of history here is, they started recording that score in Germany. Huh. And the musicians just could not keep up with the music. And so it was the scoring sessions were moved to England with the National Philharmonic, and they were able to get the score recorded, quickly and efficiently.
What, was that a financial decision to do it in Germany, maybe to save a little money?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was. And so Bruce said to me, the only thing we only used from those sessions was the main title. And I went, oh my gosh, because the album says, National Philharmonic, but the main title was actually recorded in Munich. And I went, oh my gosh. So that was a big, big deal to me because I love the score so much. But then a few years later, we wound up working on the album, and he had the tapes, and there were the Munich sessions. There they were. Huh. So we had those transferred as well. And one of the cues they recorded that wasn't used was Clever Girl, which is this terrific action cue, and it's very exciting. And that's the cue that made me want to get that album in the first place, in 1990. And so there were all these takes of Clever Girl that no one had ever heard. It was done, because the version used in the movie was done in England, but
Yeah.
here was the German recording. And I went, geez, I'd love to include this on the album. And Bruce said, well, it's terrible. And, I don't want to embarrass anybody. And I went, okay, that's fair. But I also felt like you really can't tell the story of Total Recall without some example of this. So I wound up taking like 7 different takes of their recording of Clever Girl and stitching them together to make a really good performance of it.
Huh.
That it didn't have to sync necessarily with the picture, which was the whole point in the first place. But
Right.
it could be a good performance that you could put on CD and not say, oh boy, that's embarrassing. And so I did this, and I said, Bruce, what do you think of this? And he was thrilled. He was happy we could put it on the album. So that's the version I chose was the German take of Clever Girl, because I was really proud that we got to include it on the CD.
Now, I'm curious, does that create a lot of problems for you that on that one project? Mm-hmm. Because I know there are things like residuals and, you got to pay the musicians for, each, well, maybe you can explain it better than I can, but so you had the majority of the album that was done by this one group, but then you had 1 or 2 things that were done by this other group, and you got to split up the payments. Is that come under your work as well?
No, that's not part of my responsibilities. I don't pay anybody.
Well, good for you then. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. I handle the creative end. I don't think it's a problem though, because it's a different. They're not like in the union, the musicians union, where in the U.S. the AFM gets reuse fees. This is sort of work for hire. Like you do the recording and the studio owns it, and off you go. So
okay.
It wasn't a problem at all.
Is that true in England as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Oh wow.
That's why
no wonder there's so many scores recorded there. Son of a gun.
It's kind of a problem because, we have these terrific scoring stages here. We have these amazing musicians here. And, the recording is being done elsewhere.
Have you ever sat in on a recording session?
I have.
The thing that amazes me in my conversations with composers over the span of this program, it amazes me, and again, I'm not a musician, but it amazes me that apparently, they put the sheet music in front of them, and sometimes with no rehearsal or maybe one go through, then they go and it's recorded. I mean, was that your experience? I mean, that amazes me.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a couple takes, but yeah, that's why we have the best musicians, because they can do that. It's terrific.
To think about coordinating, it could be, 50, 60, 90, 100 people to be all on the same page and, okay, let's go. It just that floors me when I think about it. It's amazing. All righty. Well, let's have a listen to this cue then. This is from the film called Total Recall. The cue is called Clever Girl, played by a German orchestra, we might add, and it's written by composer Jerry Goldsmith. Enjoy. We'll get back to the program in a moment. Let me tell you, I couldn't do this program without support from listeners just like you. When you press like or comment on a particular episode, it helps grow our audience. Now, admittedly, my audience is somewhat small compared to other podcasts, but it is growing, and I thank you for that growth. Now, how else could you help me keep the podcast going? Well, by becoming a patron of the program through patreon.com. For as little as $3 a month, you help me keep the program going, plus you gain access to special bonus clips from our guests each episode. By being a patron, you could also end up being a featured guest on future episodes. So please consider becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/whatsthescore. That's patreon.com/whatsthescore, and what's the score is all one word. Your support is valued and appreciated. Please go to patreon.com and support us today. Thank you. Okay, I'm sure you're aware of what I'm going to ask you about now, or at least aware of the legend that was out there for many, many years. Mm-hmm. The legend being that, well, we'll never get a complete release of the Moonraker score because the tapes are lost. They were destroyed, they're in Paris, they got lost, or whatever the case may be. What's the story on that? How did that all of a sudden? Oh, wow, look, we found them. I mean, I don't know if you're at liberty to kind of tell the story, but I'd really like to hear what your experience with it was.
Not only did we find them, we found everything. So that was my friend and colleague, Lucas Kendall, who didn't say that they were lost. Like, that's the thing. The internet just sort of ran with it, and it ballooned.
Right.
He had worked on several Bond albums in the early 2000s.
Right.
Thunderball through Live and Let Die. And those tapes were all together at Abbey Road. You know, I've seen the inventory. They're there. And he said something like, Moonraker's not there. It was recorded in Paris. I don't know where it is. Or it's something like that.
Uh-huh.
But that just ballooned into the tapes are lost, and we're never going to hear Moonraker. And, I could never say one way or the other. I never looked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that happens sometimes, when we were asked to do Octopussy just in 2023, it was like, sure, we'll do that. Those tapes we had a hard time finding.
Huh.
But with Moonraker, so when we finally got the go-ahead, and look, I wanted to work on Moonraker. I wanted to look for it. I wanted to, I wanted the music. I thought it could be, I thought it could sound better, but what is it? So, or where is it? And so when we got to go ahead to do the project, I reached out to MGM, and they gave me an inventory, and it was like, oh, there it is. It's just, okay. Now, keep in mind, I was very excited. I was like, oh, there it is. But you also have to remember, sometimes things aren't what they appear.
Yeah.
And so what that means is, look, they have all these 2-inch tapes with Moonraker on it. But do these have the takes that I need? Could these be 2-inch tapes that had the takes that I need cut out of them? Don't laugh. It's happened. And you go, oh, gee, I don't know. So it's like, I'm very excited. We have Moonraker tapes, but I can't jump up and down for joy yet because I just don't know what's on them until I hear them. And then finally, when I did get to hear them, I went, "Oh, okay, it's all here." Thank goodness.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, do the ID? And I forgot how it works. It's like what 1M6K or whatever the. Yeah. Do they ID all the takes like on a piece of paper or something like that, so you know what's on there?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, there's paperwork that matches the tapes. These tapes happen to be in French,
Yeah.
which I didn't quite get at first, but then by the end of listening to, again, listening and listening and listening and listening, I started to understand, my rudimentary high school French paid off finally. But I did ask MGM, I was like, I said, do you have photos of these boxes? And they sent them over, and they lined up perfectly. And I went, yep, perfect. That's great. That's all I need.
And so they were at Abbey Road or somewhere else?
No. These MGM had them.
In L.A.?
I'm not going to say exactly where they were.
Okay.
But MGM had them.
Son of a gun.
So, yeah, it was like, and look, they had everything. They just had it all. I was just like, oh, they had the Paul Williams demos. They had, they had
yeah, that was fascinating too. I mean, that's just, gosh, the stuff you had put on there, not only the complete score, but some of the extras, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
It's one of those things where you go, I couldn't wait this. First of all, I've been listening to it since April, May, in some capacity. It didn't come out until November, so I had to keep my mouth shut. But I was like, boy, I can't believe that we've got not just people are just not going to expect this. This level of quality, because we remake. Mike Matessino remixed it from the 2-inch tapes. They're not going to expect that not only do we have all this music, but we've read about the Paul Williams demos. Well, not only are they here, but they've been remixed as well. They're not some muddy mono from cassette tape. It's like it's a full production, and you couldn't ask for anything more on Moonraker.
No, and the Paul Williams demo, was that done in Los Angeles or in England?
Paris.
Was it really? Wow.
It sure was, yeah.
Son of a gun. Yeah. And I guess there never was a recording of Frank Sinatra doing it, right?
No, so Sinatra bailed before he recorded it.
Okay.
There were rumors of, now I'm blanking on the other singer. If you give me a moment, I'll look it up.
Johnny Mathis?
Johnny Mathis,
yeah.
Of course. I don't know how far that got. The boxes that we had specifically said no vocals archived. So I don't know if anything was recorded or not. But I never saw any indication of a vocal being on there for a Mathis recording. But
well, since we're talking about Moonraker, why don't we play something from that? The cue you chose was a launch program, which is something that was unreleased. So it's great that that you were able to get that on CD, and so that all the fans could enjoy it. Of course, it's written by, as everybody knows in my audience, my favorite composer, John Barry. Tell me a little bit about why, out of all the things you could have chosen for Moonraker, why was it you chose this particular cue?
Well, not only is it unreleased, it's also not used in the movie.
Ah.
And so this was one of those cases where I was sitting down like, oh, I can see where this music goes. It goes after Snake Fight, but before the Marines lift off. So I had this whole section of movie. Where does this music go? And I thought, well, does it go for the reveal of Drax's, control room, which is this magnificent Ken Adams set? I was like, no, it doesn't go there. I was like, and I'm watching the scene. I'm like, well, it's got to go somewhere. And then it sort of clicked. I tried it out. I went, I think that's it. And then I worked with an editor, my friend Harry Frischberg, and I went to his place. I said, I think this cue goes here. Let's try it out. And sure enough, when the shuttles are launching and the cue kicks off, you're like, oh yeah, that's totally where it goes. And it was just this magnificent cue, and you're just like, I wonder why they didn't use this. What was the thought process where they said, you know what, this scene works better without the music? And I guess maybe it was the talking and the sound effects and all that, everything was, vying for your attention. They thought they could take the music out. And the movie works fine without it. But I think the cue's magnificent, and I think maybe the scene might have worked better with the music.
Well, and it brings up, it was going to be another question of mine, but I guess I'll go ahead and bring it up now since it's kind of in that same vein. I was actually surprised to learn, and you've given one example. The other example was, and I remember, I don't be offended. I put in the Moonraker thing, and I said, I cannot wait to hear the pre-title sequence. I just can't wait. And I'm listening to it, and it's like, hold on a minute, it's something different.
Yeah.
Why is that different? Oh, doggone. And then at the end is, oh, okay, at least they included that part, but why is it out of sequence like that? It wasn't until then I did a little bit of posting on Facebook, and people said, well, that's the way Barry originally scored it, and then for whatever reason someone came in and recut it in the way that they thought was best for the film. Does that happen a lot?
It happens all the time, and it's that they're just trying to make the most effective dramatic movie, the most effective version of the movie.
Because I had no idea. I mean that.
No one knew. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand maybe someone like the example we're going to play here in a minute. Maybe they drop an entire piece, an entire cue. I mean, you never know any different anyway. But then, but to know that someone can go in, and I wonder, I would have loved to have asked John Barry about, how did you feel about that re-edit of that cue or stuff?
That cue has given, no cue that I've ever released, I don't think, has given me more issues than that one.
Really? How come?
Because everybody, for 45 years, everybody heard the looped version in the film. To the point that's what was even re-recorded for the Bond Back in Action album, was the looped version.
Right, yeah.
So we all just thought, well, that's what it is. And then it turns out, no, it's not. It's just the same part played twice. And just sort of and I stand behind it because, I'm not releasing what's heard in the movie. I'm releasing what the composer wrote and recorded and intended.
No, it's understandable, especially now that I know the story behind it. So, yeah.
But it was just I still see people going, "Oh, I wish we had the film version." I'm like, but that's just a post-production decision. That's not a performance. That's so.
Yeah, who makes it? Is that the director or the sound editor? Who makes that call? Do you know?
I mean, on that. I mean, it could be anyone. It could be the editor, could be the director, could be the producers. Eon is very hands-on.
Well, you know the story behind Moonraker and John Barry when it came out. Do you know that story about how he reacted? Okay.
Yeah, and I sort of wonder what he saw because you're talking about they mixed it in mono. And
yeah, right. Yeah, because I won't bore everybody else with it, and I mentioned it brief. Well, no, I don't know if I mentioned it to you or not, but I had a brief interview with him way back in 1981, and he had said that, I went to go see the movie at the I forgot the name of the theater, but it was like the finest sound system in Los Angeles to watch the film. And he said, and basically he says my jaw dropped as the movie opened because it was supposed to be in Dolby Stereo and it wasn't. And he basically blamed Lewis Gilbert for that, and I don't know whether that's.
It's funny. I'll tell you two quick stories.
Sure.
So one is I went to a double feature at the New Beverly here in Los Angeles, which is a repertory theater owned by Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar with it, yeah.
And after Roger Moore died, they did a double feature of The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. And I went. And
wow. Spy
Who Loved Me was first, and terrific, wonderful. And then, there was a little break, and then Moonraker started. And by the way, Spy Who Loved Me was monaural.
Right.
And then as soon as Moonraker started and that gun barrel came on, the whole sound in the theater opened up. I was like, okay, that's totally stereo. Like you could tell the difference. I'll tell you another story real quick.
And he was projecting in film in that theater, right?
That's a 30. Yes, those were both 35 millimeter.
Yeah,
correct.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So no. That's fine. So then, in 2012, John Burlingame hosted an evening at the Samuel Goldwyn Theater, which is the Academy Motion Picture Art and Sciences big main theater. He hosted an evening all about the music of Bond for the 50th anniversary. And Vic Flick was there, Bill Conti was there, all sorts of people were there.
Oh, wow.
And throughout the evening, they'd also show clips. And I was sitting right behind the mixing console. That's just happened to be where my seat was, whatever.
Yeah.
Whenever they showed something from 35 millimeter film, it sounded terrific. They played the ending to A View to a Kill, and the whole theater was rocking. And this was just 35 millimeter optical, but it sounded fantastic.
Huh.
But when they went to digital, if they showed something like the boat chase from World Is Not Enough,
yeah,
that was mono. and as I couldn't believe, like flat dead mono. I was like, what? And I'm sitting right behind the console, so like I'm right behind this guy. So like when the evening was over, I said, hey guys, did you happen to notice that the 35 millimeter stuff sounded fantastic, and the digital stuff was all mono? And like they looked at me like what planet are you from? And I was like,
well, actually, the planet I'm from is someone that pays attention to that stuff.
You know, it happens. It's a weird thing with audio is when you notice a mistake and you report it to someone, they all look at you like you're crazy. It happens all the time at theaters with me because I'm very particular because I listen all day long, so I know what to listen for, and if there's a problem, it's like so. Anyway. I don't know what Barry heard. It's possible there was a screw up in the projection. When we had the 2-inch tapes for Moonraker, it had obviously like the individual tracks for each section of the orchestra, you know, like violins, woodwinds, percussion, that sort of thing, synthesizers. But it also had a 3-track stereo mix, and I was like, this mix on here, this 3-track mix matches what's in the film, like. So it was totally mixed for Dolby Stereo. I've heard it in Dolby Stereo, and I've seen that the music was mixed for stereo. So I don't know what Barry was hearing that day, and I'm sorry he didn't have a positive experience seeing Moonraker with the full sound.
Yeah, when I saw it, and I made a special trip, I drove like 3 hours to see it in Dolby. That was in the days when not every theater had it.
Sure.
And I noticed that the sound effects were definitely in stereo, but the music didn't seem that way. So and Moonraker was that a 24 track?
What the 2-inch?
Yeah.
No,
16.
Yeah, I think it was 16 with the LCR also on.
That amazes me. It just my mind's boggled by that, thinking about how all the separate microphone. Anyway, well, we've talked enough about it. We need to listen to it.
Yeah, let's play it now.
This is I only wrote down part of the name of the cue. The total cue is called Launch Program. Oh, I Bid You Farewell, I think.
Yeah, it's Launch Program Commence, and I Bid You Farewell. I probably should have called it Commences, but what can you do?
Right, and this was not in the film, so this will be interesting. Oh.
Well, Launch Program Commence is not the film, but part of I Bid You Farewell is.
Okay. And again, this is from the film Moonraker, and it's written by the maestro, John Barry. Enjoy. I don't know if you're the right person to ask on this, but I know there's been a lot of chatter about this, and that's simply this: that are CDs going to be a thing of the past? Does that concern you, or just what are your thoughts on it? That a lot of people just, I'll just stream it down to my iPhone or something. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you like soundtrack albums, you're gonna want to stick with something physical.
Yeah.
And that's not because you get the booklet, you get all the. It's simply the logistics. There's no way to stream something like the expanded Moonraker album because one record label, one company has the rights to the record, the other company has the rights to the unreleased stuff. So it takes a third party like La La Land to put it all together, and they get to put it out on CD. They don't get the digital rights to that.
Huh.
So that's why it comes out on CD. Because, you could put out an inexpensive package that has, up to 2.5 hours worth of music if you have a, standard, slimline case, 2-disc set.
Right.
And that seems sufficient for most of these releases. Is the CD going to be around? I sure hope so. Records kind of went away, but they're certainly coming back with a vengeance now.
Isn't that funny? I know.
I don't ask me to explain that one. I happen to love the CD format.
Me too. I don't know why people are. I mean, I don't know why vinyl is so. It's a warmer sound, or it's bad. I'm sorry. I don't know. I just I was grateful when CDs came out, and I just thought the improved sound quality was just unparalleled, and I just don't see how 180 gram vinyl is somehow better. It's probably just a matter of personal preference or whatnot.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. And I'll never tell any person how to enjoy music. Listen to what you want to listen to, how you want to listen to it. That's terrific. But for these releases, the only way to do it is on a physical format. And I know, when we put out something like Tomorrow Never Dies, which I think runs about 100 minutes. The total score is 100 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And, one of the first reactions you see is, well, is there going to be a vinyl release? Well, geez, if we put out 100-minute score, to say nothing of any of the bonus tracks, because that's about a 2.5-hour long album.
Yeah.
But just the score at 100 minutes, that's going to be, 3 platters? They're like a big box. It's going to be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Not only to release, but to produce. And it's it's there a market, and it's a terrific score, but I just don't know, how we do these big releases. They don't really translate to vinyl, but we're doing, some things, and so yeah, it's just sort of this question of how do you do it, and does it work? And it's a whole thing. But for something that's super long, I don't know how you put out the full thing, and make it cost effective, because it is a limited market. I'd like to think that everybody wants the soundtrack to Moonraker, but it's about 5,000 people.
Well, that's nothing to sneeze at, but still, I know it's not going to be a million seller or platinum or anything like that, but...
Then they used to be, when Star Wars, when, Star Wars came out in 1997 again for the 20th anniversary, that sold huge.
A double album, as I recall.
It was a 2 CD set. I'm talking about when they reissued Star Wars.
Okay.
The expanded album, it still sold well, So
that was almost. Would you say that was? I don't know if it was Star Wars. It might have been, but was that kind of the rebirth of the popularity of film scores, Star Wars, or did it happen before then? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
Are you talking about orchestral scores?
Yeah, in terms of a market for people going out and actually buying, soundtracks probably was a pretty limited market for a while, and then all of a sudden, and again, I don't know if it was Star Wars or something before that.
It was.
But all of a sudden, it became more. What's the word? More mainstream or broader appeal.
Sure. You had the Jaws album as well.
Yeah.
very successful. Star Wars was very successful. But I still think, Saturday Night Fever was the big seller in 77.
Yeah.
It's still a soundtrack, but, it had words. So.
Yeah, it had those pesky words in it. Doggone it. You chose and I love this movie, but I think I mentioned to you in our prior conversation before we started recording, I love this movie, but I don't really remember the score, so I'm looking forward to hearing this. The film I'm talking about is Whose Life Is It Anyway? It's written by Arthur B. Rubinstein, and the cue is called Dialysis. It seems like kind of an obscure choice to share with our listeners today, so I'd like to hear the background and the story behind why you wanted to include that today amongst your favorites.
This goes back to this being the This Is Your Life podcast. This is a very, very early project in my career. I'd been working with Lucas Kendall on, I think, like 2 projects concurrently or around the same time. 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T and Wonderful World of Brothers Grimm. But then Whose Life Is It Anyway came along, and he wanted me to work with Arthur B. Rubinstein on this, who I admired from his score to War Games.
Yeah.
Which is the same director, John Badham, as Whose Life Is It Anyway?
Oh, okay.
And he wanted me to work with Arthur, and I wound up going to Arthur's studio, which, again, I haven't done much work, and here I am working with the composer I'm crazy about, and I'm getting to work on his computer to edit his score, and we had all sorts of conversations. We got along really well, and it was a very enjoyable experience. And I'll tell a story here. So, I was brand new at this, and I was figuring things out. I wasn't the seasoned professional that I am now, whatever that means. and so I'm at his computer working on this score. I don't remember what cue it was. I don't think it was Dialysis, which, by the way, is another cue not in the movie. I just keep picking cues that aren't in films. But anyway, I don't think it's all in the film. Maybe some of it is. I don't recall now. But anyway, so I'm sitting at his computer editing this score, and we have the take in front of us, and we both hear a mistake. And we're like, oh, there's a mistake in the violins. Huh. And I'm the new guy. I don't, I know how to do stuff in theory, but I haven't had much practice, working on actual scores. But I say to him, oh, that's nothing. We can easily fix that. And I went to another take, and I found the part, and I cut it in, and it was seamless. And I did it right in front of Arthur, right on his computer, having never done it before in my life, and it worked perfectly. And I just went, oh, okay, let's move on. and so I totally made it look like this was nothing, a piece of cake, and I'd never done it, and it worked out well. And we made a very successful album. He was very happy with it. I eventually did tell him how much I love War Games, but I didn't really nerd out until Whose Life was done and available, and we were at an event. I was like, I just got to tell you how much I love Square.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking. Is that I think you used the phrase "nerd out." I mean, was that sometimes when working? I don't know how many times you've had to actually work with the composer. Mm-hmm. Perhaps you can tell me, but is that kind of difficult to kind of keep your fanboy voice down to a minimum, And
I wouldn't say it's difficult because it's actually, it comes with the job. So, like, even when I'm working on Moonraker, I have to focus on the music. I have to focus on what is happening. I have to put this together, and I have to set aside, my enthusiasm for whatever it is. It has to be laser focused. And when I'm dealing with people, I sort of, I'll you just sort of ask a question or something, but I won't go too crazy until maybe I get to know them better, Yeah. So now I get calls from Bruce Botnick, and he tells me Jerry Goldsmith stories, and that's always cool. But when I first started working with him, it was just sort of like, okay, this is this is what we have today, and we'll do this, and you just sort of get to know someone, and then maybe you can carry on a conversation and ask some questions. But I try to be. You keep it all professional.
Did you ever have a chance to meet people like, Goldsmith or Williams or John Barry or anybody like that?
I never got to meet Goldsmith or Barry. I've interacted with Williams, but never so much in a professional capacity.
Yeah.
Before I was doing this, I was at a Hollywood Bowl concert a Hollywood Bowl rehearsal.
Oh, okay.
And I was backstage, and I was just sort of on the stage as they were performing Superman, and I sort of just got out of his way as he was talking. But yeah, I've never worked so much with him. I'm trying to think. Cliff Idleman, we worked with on Star Trek.
Oh, okay.
6.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking right now on who else I've worked with.
No, that's all right. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure it's a thrill when you do have a chance to work with someone that's got that kind of talent, and what you're trying to do is to help that come to life. So, well, let's have a listen to this cue that we were talking about. This is again from the film. What a powerful movie, Jeepers. Whose Life Is It Anyway? The cue is called Dialysis, and it's written by composer Arthur B. Rubinstein. Let's have a listen. I probably you're not going to be able to. Well, maybe you can answer this, but doggone it, how do you guys keep these projects so secret? You've had lots of. I mean, I'm amazed. I don't know how many people kind of are in the. And again, we'll use like Moonraker as an example, which was that's like the mother lode or whatever. And I don't know how many people were kind of in the know that it was. Oh, you guys are working on it. Is that got to be hard to keep your mouth shut, when, especially something that might be as exciting as that one probably was?
It's not so bad because I have, or we all, I hope we have, I have sort of a core group that I can discuss things with. On Moonraker, I was working with Mike Matessino. So if I wanted to talk about Moonraker, I just give him a call. I'm just like, okay, let's, or if I want to talk with Michael Gerhardt at La La Land or Matt Verbois, we just, chat. It's part of the fun, I guess, that, and keep in mind, we also knew that Moonraker was going to be like the big release for the end of the year.
Yeah.
And La La Land has this tradition of announcing things, at the end of the year. and people are always anticipating it. So it's sort of, so you want to build up that suspense or that drama. But yeah, it's just, it's nobody's business what I'm working on until it's ready to come out, and that's really that's just sort of how it goes. It's that's just the nature of the business. How it
can you tell your wife?
I do talk with her, yeah.
But she knows to keep her mouth shut.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know how much she necessarily cares. I mean, she's happy.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Moonraker,
yeah,
okay,
she's
fine.
happy for me, but I don't know if she's as excited about guitar overlays as as I am. but we'll chat. And she'll tell me about her. We'll talk about our day. What did you do? And she'll tell me about approving a billing block for a movie. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, well,
okay, great.
I edited this cue today, and it went very well. Or it's just we keep those. But yeah, it's all. We just
funny.
Just keep it under our hats. It's the way it's always been. One of the first things I worked on, we talked about it earlier, was Star Trek 2, and it was like, boy, people are going to flip out when this comes out, but let's wait for the announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you? I don't think you have a big social media presence, which is fine. But I'm, a lot of times when I start to wrap these interviews up, I always say, well, how can people, get in touch with you or follow you or those sorts of things? I guess you're not really into that sort of thing, or is that?
I'm recovering. I am on Blue Sky.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to follow me or see what's going on, I'm on Blue Sky. I don't. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I don't belong. Any place else really. I guess on LinkedIn. LinkedIn counts, right? We all get emails.
Oh yeah. So but I mean, a lot of times people might want to say, or might want to, what's he working on, or what's he just done, or something like that, and perhaps on LinkedIn or Blue Sky they can find that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, and I tend to update them, when I can.
Okay, and is there? I know the answer to this is going to be, but I'll ask it anyway.
Sure, go ahead.
So, what you working on now that's going to come out soon?
None of your damn business.
Like I said, I knew the answer.
and look, the good news is, if you're a collector, I'm working on many projects right now. It's a little overwhelming.
Well, but some good stuff that there's an audience out there that'll be excited about it.
I sure hope so. And I've got projects going on with various. I got Quartet Records. I got the project coming there. We just had Cape Fear come out. I've been in the middle of several projects with Intrada. Something I did should be coming from Varese. So there's all sorts of stuff going on.
Okay, and I know you won't be able to answer this, but I just hope there's some John Barry stuff coming down the road. I'm just saying. So you don't have to answer that.
It's always nice. I love Barry too. So, but I sure hope so.
Neil, look, it's just been a delight talking to you, and I've learned so much. I just kind of like hearing the inside baseball, if you will, or kind of behind the scenes stuff of how all this stuff comes together. You've been terrific to talk to. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have as well.
I have. Thank you.
Thanks again on behalf of all film music fans that are out there for the work that you do, and I know, especially after having talked to you, the diligence that you have in trying to make sure you put out the best possible product, and also things that people have been dying for and looking for. And so on behalf of all of them, we want to thank you for all your work. It's just absolutely terrific and appreciated. I just want you to know that.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So I guess with that, there's not much else to say. Again, I want to thank not only our guest, Neil, for joining us today, but also all our listeners for the program, as well as those of you that are part of our Patreon program. We will have a bonus clip with Neil that will be available that you can listen to as well for those of you that are patrons. And I guess with that, there's only one thing left for me to say, and that's simply this, that my name's Frank R. Wilson. My time's up. I thank you for yours. Thanks for listening to What's the Score?